Okay. Good evening, everyone. The time is 6:36. This is a special call meeting of the Board of Trustees of United ISD. Today is Thursday, September the 2nd, 2021. We're present at the United ISD boardroom at 201 Lindenwood Drive in Laredo, Texas. For the record, could we please have an announcement of those members present? Starting on my right.
Ricardo Molina Sr.,
Javier Vélez III, Ricardo Retrovido, Javier Montemayor. There is a forum for the record. I hereby call this meeting to order. This meeting has been duly called, and notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Will everyone please rise for the pledge of allegiance?
United States of America, and the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag, pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Apologize for starting a little late. We're in a virtual hearing. Just got out. It was a little longer. So can we do? Can I get a motion to move up item number 6, report from District Administration regarding the COVID mitigation measures?
Like motion on the item.
Motion. Second. All right, motion passes. Can we get the COVID update? I believe we also have Dr. Perez.
Yes, sir. Just to give you some basic information prior to Mr. Firmino's comments and interaction. To date, we have approximately 45 employees that have been identified as COVID positive. We have 108 students, which is actually a slight reduction from last Saturday's presentation on the 111 that we had COVID positive. In addition, our COVID handbook has been provided. It's online. It's available to the public. And it also has all the mitigation measures that we're using at UISD. We have some additional public service announcements that we're happy to share with the board, perhaps as soon as we're done with the interaction with Dr. Trevino. I know that Representative Raymond is here also to help speak or to speak on the items. Just to kind of give a brief overview, we do disinfecting protocols in all of our facilities. As the board is probably aware, we have had a shortage of employment opportunities. We just don't have individuals applying to work. It's probably in our entire community that's happening. We currently have about 25 custodial positions that are vacant. We have individuals that are resigning or leaving or retiring, and we have had difficulty in trying to hire new individuals. Because of that, we've looked at other measures and getting other individuals from other categories. For example, some of our security guards have volunteered or have decided to work after hours for pay to be custodians as well at the end of the day. So the demands that we're asking of our staff is great in terms of the amount of disinfecting that needs to happen. And we're getting a great effort from all of our individuals here at UISD. With that being said, we do have some protocols or some numbers in terms of what we represent as either mild cases or extreme cases. When we do look at the different percentages, we factor getting into a mild range about 5%. That is usually the protocol that's used with the CDC in terms of a percentage based on 100,000 individuals, right? So that's kind of the category that we're trying to use our model, our numbers for. Again, last week it was based on a number of 4 students per campus, regardless of the campus being 600, 300, or 3,000. And so we just wanted to be able to have a better standard to work off of so that we have at least a gauge to be able to look at where we're at in terms of our cases in our district. So I would just leave it up to any questions, or if you'd like to have Dr. Trevino say a few words.
Does anybody have any questions for?
Quick question, Mr. Rosado.
Yes, sir.
I know you mentioned a number of 108
Yes, sir, currently.
Is that active current cases right now that we don't have the students at the campus?
That is correct, sir. So as they are identified and we go through our intake process, which is pretty extensive, that's probably something that we should share in the future with the board, the actual process of the intake. It does require a lot of time and effort on our part. We actually have a dedicated staff of about 8 individuals that is all they do. They take intakes from the different campuses, working together in collaboration with our nursing staff. And so that process gets us to the point of identification. And then, of course, we immediately send those individuals for quarantine. Now, we don't just look at the positive cases, we look at anybody with any symptoms, right? And so we immediately either test them on site. Well, if they're students, we do it with parental consent. If they're employees, we ask them, they have to voluntarily subject themselves to testing. Or we ask them to go ahead and get tested on the outside and self-report as soon as they get the results. So even individuals with symptoms, we do encourage them to leave the premises until we know what the actual diagnosis is.
Correct. Just to give a quick overview, I think, once they're out of the campus, that they are positive, they're going to be at least how many days out of the campus?
It is a 10-day minimum requirement. We do then do remote conferencing for them, so they are not missing out on the instructional time. There is a time frame between identification and the remote conferencing. There is a process that we've come up with that is pretty unique and pretty good for what we're doing. Just thinking of the numbers that we're dealing with. As students come out, they're allowed to get they're released to go back to campus as long as they meet that quarantine period.
Go ahead.
That's a follow up. So one of the biggest concerns has always been the passing periods, the lunch hours. I've heard parent complaints concerning, they're not letting my son go outside or my daughter go outside. They can't be in their cars. Just rough estimate. If we've got 3,000 students at United High School, main campus, we've got 3 lunches. I'm figuring roughly about 1,000 students for lunch. How is the district handling those? It seems like it's just a large amount of people in one room. And so it's almost a super spreader sort of event. And so if there's somebody positive there, the Delta variant, as we've been informed, is very contagious, extremely contagious, more than the COVID. How is the district dealing with that situation?
So as you mentioned, sir, we do have the 3 lunch periods that we've enacted in every one of the locations. We have the outdoor dining that we made available. We have allowed parents to come on the campus, allow for their children to get in the vehicle with them and have the meals on site. In some cases, if they're quick, they can go back out and come back in. I will tell you, sir, that a lot of our high schools specifically have identified those students who refuse to eat. They're just students that won't eat lunch. So in those cases, we've actually sent them to the gymnasium, the larger gym, to be able to kind of spread out in those particular locations. So we've reduced the number of actual students in the lunchroom by eliminating a lot of those cases. I will tell you, my daughter goes to United South High School. She's a senior. And she tells me a rough estimate that almost half of the students in the lunch period end up in the gym because they just are not eating or don't care to eat. And then you have individuals that go outside. And so she's identified as having enough sufficient space between individuals to be able to have her lunch in her case.
I think that's a big concern that's difficult to deal with. But yeah, I'm sure you all have seen the pictures that have
Yes, sir.
been circulating. And
Mr. Montalban, if I may, and that was certainly always the first day of school.
Sure.
And every day, I think we've done a better job. We keep improving on what we have in place for our protocols, and we're going to continue to do that. Obviously, nothing's perfect, but our objective is to make sure that we do everything possible to keep all our students safe. And you're right, sometimes the passing in time is not ideal as far as social distancing, but we're going to continue to do everything in our part to make it safe for every single day.
just one last question that I have, because it's been asked of me, and I'll share with you. What other options, maybe at one point or another we'll talk about it, but staggered days, morning and afternoon sort of shift of attendance. I think there's been talk about A and B schedules, things like that. Have y'all looked at it, or are y'all considering some of those options in the past, or early with our situation, should our numbers start getting?
We continue to look at all our options, obviously transportation being one of the biggest entities and the logistics of it, and we're gonna continue that. And I will tell you that we're looking at all options. You know, yesterday I was in Austin, School Alliance. We're looking at some of the bills that are out there. Senate Bill 15, we're looking at virtual learning right now is 10%, but there's parameters. So it's sitting in the governor's desk. And obviously we feel that's gonna help us. We're gonna get guidance from our state, but are we looking at what else we can do to help our students? Yes. That's what I'd like to address.
Yes, and the only thing that we do have to make sure that we maintain the 75,600 minutes of instruction. And so that is really what holds us to keeping our schedules and keeping the students on campus to be able to meet those minutes of instruction as mandated by the state. So that is another parameter that we've got to work with. We did at one time submit our proposal for hybrid learning, and that would have given us more options, but that was again killed by the legislative session, so we were not given that opportunity to use hybrid learning.
I just want to make sure that the public is aware that those options still exist. They're not by any means dead, so to speak. And, you know, they'll always be considered should the numbers increase, should things change, and we're always adjusting to the situation. We're improving and modifying as we go along. And so should things change later on, hopefully they get better. But should they not, then, you know, obviously those options could come into play at some point.
And I will tell you that I was at United High School last week visiting for another purpose, and we got to see lunch periods, and we did see where they've had a smaller number of students actually in the cafeteria eating. There was enough spacing, they were zigzagged, and then all of the students that were in the hallways or they were outside, well, the ones outside could remove their masks, but the ones in the hallways, they were sitting masked. And the passing, that's also the students are masked. So, you know, that's a mitigating factor that we're using that we feel has helped us keep those numbers small, given the number of students that we have on campus.
I've seen a lot of cooperation from our students and staff.
Oh,
As
yeah.
far as wearing masks, you know, it's obvious that they are in with wearing masks. So
And they want to keep going to school. That's
Yeah.
pretty much most of the students that I've been able to interact with have been thankful that the year has gone back to some normalcy.
Yes, absolutely.
I've done informal surveys, I'll just mention it, that, you know, different middle and high school, different classes. I've had friends of mine ask their students, okay, what would you prefer, virtual instruction over face-to-face instruction? And the overwhelming majority was in favor of face-to-face instruction. I think the socialization there is important, the mental health situation is there. The other, it was about 80-20, 84 and 20 were not in favor of face-to-face. But the ones who were not in favor of it were more concerned with getting the virus, or contracting the virus, and then taking it home to their parents or their elderly grandparents. But they were, you know, very enthusiastic about that.
I had a comment, you know, like United High School, it's got 3,500 kids. And people have to understand, and even the media and the city and everybody else, you know, the school was built for a normal 3,500 kids to be in the campus, to be in the hallway, to be in the cafeteria. They never planned on the epidemic. So, you know, the district is doing miracles, trying to divide the kids at all the high schools. Because all the high schools were built, you know, so normal times, not for this difficult time that we have. And that's something that is never mentioned, you know, that the district is doing great things, dividing, putting in the gym, doing all this stuff. And they say, well, we see a lot of kids in the hallway. Well, where are you gonna see them? There's 3,400 kids in the high school. Where are you gonna have them? They have to be in the hallway. They have to be in the school. United modifying where they are and everything and doing the best they can. And I think, congratulations to everybody, to all the staff and everybody, the superintendent, Mike, Gloria, everybody that's working, I would say day and night, trying to figure all these difficult times that are here and they're here to stay for a while. So we have to work with all of that. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right,
Thank you for the update. Move to agenda item number 4, public comments. Or I think we have, well, before we move to that, I think we have Dr. Trevino who also.
Yes.
addresses. Trevino, can you hear Dr. Trevino?
Yes, I can. And good evening, Mr. President, board members, and the public in attendance, both in person and virtually. My name is Dr. Victor Trevino, Health Authority for the City of Laredo. And I do want to thank you for inviting me to this meeting tonight. I would like to say that I have a great deal of respect for educators and their valuable efforts throughout this pandemic. I do also want to thank UISD for today's involvement in the litigation to preserve the mask mandate in our community. We know that it is critical that the mask mandates remain for the unvaccinated populations. And if I may, I would like to go over the infection environment we're currently finding ourselves in. As you may be aware, Laredo, unlike other communities our size and even smaller, does not have a pediatric intensive care unit. And we have 1/3 of the amount of primary care physicians our size, and our hospitals were on diversion for several days during the month of August. And while reporting 0 ICU beds for the 24 days. Now, this is in addition to the fact that we have been seeing an increase in pediatric cases in Texas and our community since May. And just to know, for example, in May, we had 85 pediatric cases. In June, we had 107. In July, we had 552. And now in August, we're now reporting 1,056 pediatric cases. And this is the largest number of pediatric cases since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, unfortunately, we had to transfer out 7 cases so far, pediatric cases, and the access to pediatric beds in the last month has been very scarce. And with the data showing that we're about to enter an apex in pediatric cases, we're preparing for the worst case scenarios because we don't have the pediatric medical staff to treat multiple critical cases. For our role as the health department and the health authority in the middle of a public health disaster, which has now taken 913 local lives, is to assure that the public that reported infection has been properly investigated and contained. Now, the health authority acts as a state officer in implementing and enforcing state and local laws that protect the public health pursuant to chapters 81 and chapter 121 of the Health and Safety Statute of Texas. One of the infection control measures given to the health authorities is the use of quarantine measures. And a quarantine is used to notify the public that a communicable disease has been reported at a specific location. And that is the duty of the health authority to quarantine the impacted areas and perform disease investigation with the assistance of the health department, and also to give recommendations to the impacted entities. And we do look forward to working in collaboration with the school districts as we move forward through these challenging times. And we do not want to sacrifice the good for the perfect. So with this in mind, I think we can have some comments so we can move forward. And as we speak, we have information that has been provided by the schools. And one other thing I did want to make is a distinction between isolation versus quarantine. And quarantine is just what we explained. Isolation is, of course, separating the affected person. And isolation means separating sick individual with a contagious disease from people who are not sick. And quarantine separates and restricts the movement in areas or people who are exposed to a contagious disease if they become sick. So with that in mind, I will stand for any questions or any things that you're concerned about to see how we can move forward on this.
I have a question, Dr. Trevino. You talk about the housing authority and the city of Laredo. I went through the LEC and they had a full sold out concert on Saturday and Sunday. I went Casablanca, they had a sold out. What is the city doing about that? You know, you're supposed to look over the city and you're looking over the school district. How about all the dances and everything? The kids are getting COVID because all those people, the city is not controlling. You're not enforcing the law that, or I would call it threat, like to United. I'm gonna close 13 schools, or you suggested closing 13 schools. How about the LEC? How about Casablanca? How about the other places that are open every weekend and they're packed with people? How are you gonna look after that? Answer me that.
Yes, that is a good point. And in
Very good.
comparing large gatherings to schools, I want to start off by saying that I have always recommended against large gatherings in environments of high transmission. However, that being said, even though these two situations have their problems, this is a faulty comparison because one population has about 80% vaccination that protect them 25-fold against hospitalization, including having the ability to be cared for at the hospitals. The other has less than 50% vaccination and no pediatric ICU. So care would be delayed and dependent on accepting hospitals out of town. So there is a difference here, but I do get your question and I do have concerns on that.
Dr. Trevino, I have a question for you. If I could go back to Saturday after we had an emergency meeting here at the boardroom, when I had a conversation, and for the record, Dr. Trevino, you did state to me after the meeting that your intention to quarantine, your intention was never to close any of our schools. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, that is correct. It was focused at areas only.
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
Doctor, this is Javier Montemayor. I've got a question. You've visited our data sites. You've seen the board that the USD has, our protocols, our information that we receive on a daily basis, how we deal with the intakes, how we're responding to positive cases and close contacts and exposures. Can you give me a grade on UISD's performance after you visited, after you've been informed? Can you tell me that UISD is doing a good job on trying to minimize the spread, trying to work with your office? Is that fair to say that we're doing a pretty good job of that?
Yes, absolutely. I did see all the work and all the efforts and all the time it took to do that. And that is very, very appreciative work. And this is information we can use tremendously at the health department for getting numbers and getting information that we do need. And we have to understand also that we get some questions from the public at large that we have certain mitigations that are looked at in other cities, and this is an understandable question. I always go back to the same problem that we are medically underserved. And with regards to the number of cases at school campuses, I do want to explain why positivity shouldn't be used in this fashion. Because the biggest reason is that we don't have a pediatric ICU, as we have said. So all the critical cases get transferred out of town. Very little has been discussed about these transfers and the fact that life-saving treatment is delayed. So we also know there's a common enormous amount of anguish and financial stress that puts a family through. Now, the other reason is that we have been seeing a gradual surge of pediatric cases in our community, not just the total numbers, but also percentages of all the cases in the community. So this is why we don't rely on positivity rates of locations or entities when we are seeing a high transmission environment. Now, absent consistent and required testing or knowing why someone is testing, the data point does not show a direct indication of infection. But as a general, to answer to your question, I was very impressed with the amount of information that was there on the board. And I do commend all that effort that has been done. We just have to get it together, put it together where we can use it in the metrics that we use. And what we use is the definition for what we do in infection control. The recommendations are going to be that isolation and separating sick individuals with a contagious disease who are not sick is absolutely important. We also have to know that other recommendations will be set forward. We're working on these to be put out as soon as tomorrow, or hopefully during the weekend, so we can get out of this quarantine. But absolutely, I do want to reiterate that all this information is very good. So another thing I do want to say on the recommendations is that universal surveillance for both staff and students instilled continued mitigation of cafeterias and areas of potential transmission, as you have started already. Surveying the student population for vaccine rates to minimize the impacts of quarantines on fully vaccinated individuals. Now, absent vaccination, testing for all extracurricular activities that are on high contact sports or have high transmission. We need to test these groups. Cohorting of students when possible to reduce the spread of COVID-19. And examples could be switching teachers instead of students. And refining close contacts information shared with the health department, specifically household members. Now, these are things that may be a little bit more difficult, but I know that some of these mitigation measures already have been put in place. So we can put all this information together, the one we saw on the board, and all these recommendations. I think we can move forward with it, with these quarantines.
Dr. Trevino, you didn't answer my question about what you were gonna do about the ADA, Atalanca, and all those places that you're supposed to govern, like a school district. Are you gonna go and check out, are you gonna see separation like you want in the schools? Are you gonna want, because those people are getting other people sick, and the city's not doing anything about those people. You're doing about the school district, but not those people. You have to do the complete picture, so everything can come, the numbers can come down. And it's a city, the LEA, I think it's city run by the city, so it falls on your jurisdiction.
Yes, absolutely. And we're having a city council meeting, and I plan to address all these concerns. So yes, you're absolutely right. We will send out some recommendations there. We will address the issue.
Mr. Roldemar, if I may just add, the UISD has a real robust self-testing program, part of the BINEX testing that the state has provided to us. And what I mean by robust is we're the 4th largest testing entity in the state of Texas. We have received approximately 80,000 test kits, and we've tested over 50,000 individual units or individual tests. Part of the mitigation that the doctor described is we are testing all of our extracurricular mandatory. There's no option for them. And in order for them to participate, they have to get tested. We do that at least once every 3 weeks. And in some cases, some schools have taken it on to testing every week. So we do leave it up to the campuses to do different types of testing mechanisms, but we provide them the materials that they need to be able to do them. Every other single student, every other employee that tests with our testing program is voluntary, and it must be with parental consent. So that's the other factor that we have to abide by when we're doing that.
Did you mention about the out of town, like the band, the cheerleading and everybody?
Yes, sir.
United canceling all I think I read it on the email, that they were gonna cancel all so they won't go to the, like out of town or whatever. But is that still in effect?
No, we're just gonna be more careful, sir, as far as checking our students and using corrective measures to help.
That's one of the mentions, they were gonna take the cheerleading, I think, in a band or something like that. They were gonna try to.
But that was revised, sir, and we're gonna allow them at this time. We're gonna keep very close measures as far as our numbers are with the COVID.
Okay. And we are recommending that they test prior to them leaving as well.
Thank you.
Doctor, thank you very much. I think we're on the same page. We have the end goal in sight. I've mentioned in public before and through my conversation with parents that at no time does anyone at this district want to jeopardize the life of anybody, not a student, not a parent, not a teacher, not a staff. So we're on the same page as that, and as you've noted, USD is working very hard. The districts locally across the state are in a difficult position. We've been ordered to open up and bring our students back to school for face-to-face education, instruction. And so we're doing everything that we can. It's been a trying time for United ISD. It's been a difficult road and it's been a stressful road. But we're doing everything we can, and we appreciate your suggestions. We appreciate your working with the district, and we remain, available for any other guidance you can give us. So thank you very much for attending.
Thank you very much, and I understand these are difficult times for all of us, but we will continue to give recommendations, and I appreciate all the help you have given us, and we anticipate that we can collaborate further in the future. Thank you.
Montemayor, I think it would be pretty good if Dr. Trevino could meet with Jeff from TEA and because we're governed by TEA, not by the city, so it'd be nice for him to meet with him and see what they can work out together.
Okay.
But TEA is recommending for us because they're the one that funds us, not the city, so I think that would be pretty good.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. Molina.
Yes, one more thing before I leave. Yes, I do appreciate that TEA information, that those are your rules that govern you. I work for the state, and I work for the Department of State and Health Services. We do look at what the TEA has rules on the school, the rules it has on the schools. And some of the rules are, I know you're bound by them, but I have to look from a public health point of view. And my position is preservation of life is paramount. But I'm pretty sure we can work together and decipher this.
Sir, we recognize that under the Health and Safety Code, you have the authority to take action as it's been done before. So we note that. We appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. All right. Any other comments or questions on this?
Yes, sir, we have a protocol. We have Representative Richard Raymond, who's your president, would like to share some comments with the board.
Good afternoon, good evening, Mr. Raymond, Director.
For the record, Richard Pena Raymond, State Representative, District 42, Laredo. But first, this is I have to make personal privilege here. And so it's the first time I come to the school board since we have our new superintendent, David Gonzalez, and I want to congratulate you and thank you for your willingness to take this position. You come in with your eyes wide open. I mean, you come in the middle of this pandemic. You didn't know it was going to surge and go back to move in the Delta direction, but you knew it was going to be a hard year anyway. And I very much appreciate your leadership. And I am sorry, Dr. Trevino, can you hear me? I want to say while you're here that Dr. Trevino and I have been working on this COVID issue since it began last year. And my appreciation and admiration for Dr. Trevino, who has spent so many hours, so many days, months now, and I guess years, working on this. And if you know Dr. Richard Trevino, who I do, I've known for 20 years now and worked with him on so many things through the years. He's a very even guy. He's not an alarmist, but he does care about people living and not dying. And so he hasn't been afraid when he sees something to say, look, we've got to look at this. And I have to say through all these many, many months now, he's been right. He's been right all the way through. And sometimes you regret that he was right because he saw something coming and people were skeptical, and then he was right. And Laredo through all this time has been, for much of this pandemic, has been a hotspot in the state of Texas, even in the country. So it's been a very difficult job. I very much appreciate what he's done. We have spent many Saturdays and Sunday nights and Monday nights and Tuesday nights and getting Commissioner Hellerstedt on the phone, the Commissioner of Health. And so I know how hard he's trying, and Mr. Molina, I think you did try to answer the question about the differences. I also believe that we probably shouldn't have concerts, and we're gonna move back in that direction. And I have a lot of folks, friends in the music industry, and that's unfortunate, but I knew that a very high percentage of those who were going to events like that had vaccines, have been vaccinated, and I also know that most of the students in UISD do not have vaccination, have not been vaccinated, so there is a big difference. But I know if it was completely up to Dr. Trevino, you wouldn't have any of those events. And so I don't put that on him. I want to thank the school board. First of all, this is man, when you all signed up to be school board members, you didn't see this one coming. I know when I signed up to be state rep, I didn't see it coming, although I will say, members of the board and Mr. Gonzalez and all the rest of you, my very first year as a state representative, which is a long time ago, 1993, that was 1994, my second year, the district that I represent, where I grew up in Benavides, Duval, Jimos County, we had an outbreak, they thought, of the Ebola virus, right? You all heard of the Ebola virus? I learned about it, viruses and how they can spread. I dealt with the CDC. I dealt with the foremost doctors in the world in learning about it, because we were very concerned whether it was going to take off in Alice, the town that I was born in. So I learned a lot about how bad this can be. And after that experience, because I insisted, we killed, we had 47 monkeys put down because 3 of them died from what appeared to be Ebola. And so I dealt with it back then, but I knew that this would come someday. What I didn't know is the kind of profound effect it would have on our communities, our state, our country, and really the world. We've seen that now. And so I wanted to come today because I knew that Dr. Trevino was going to be here, and also I just wanted to, I know that the signals you get out of Austin can be contradictory at times, mixed in with some politics. And that's unfortunate. I mean, we're all political, we run for office, most of us here run for office. But when it comes to something like this, loss of life, you've got to try to put politics aside as much as you can. That's part of what I appreciate about Dr. Trevino and even Dr. Hellerstedt. They put politics aside when they make their assessments and when they make their recommendations. Now we have to deal with, and Mr. Montamero was telling me, he's talked to a lot of parents. Well, I've talked to a lot of parents and grown-ups and non-parents and grandparents and all that. And so I know how difficult it is. What I would like to recommend to you, Mr. Gonzalez, and really to the board, we finished up today in Austin, but we will have another special session this month. Well, likely it'll be this month. My guess is 2 to 3 weeks from right now, maybe a little bit longer. The governor will call us back in. And in the world of pandemics, 2 to 3 weeks is a long time, but that gives you time, I think, in working with your associations, working with other superintendent, CASA, et cetera, working with other school districts to come to us and say, look, we need help in this kind of way. You need more flexibility, for example, in virtual learning and not losing money as a result of it. When it comes to losing money or losing lives, I know which side I'm going to vote on. And so we need to hear from you guys, from the superintendents, from the school boards as we move forward, and what you think you need, what tools you need. And that's what I can say. I know that we're about to embark on a political season because the governor's running for election. He's been challenged in his own primary. I just speak candidly here. That Republican primaries are extremely conservative, and many people in sort of that area don't believe in masks, don't believe in vaccines, don't believe in anything. But what we see is this: that in the state of Texas, these are the official numbers as of last week. 45% of all Texans, 45% of all Texans have not gotten even one vaccine. 45%. That's nearly half. Roughly 30 million people. So we're headed for some troubled waters here because the Delta variant is so much more contagious, than COVID-19. So it's gonna hit the schools, it's just a matter of how much can you hold it back? Listening to Mike, what you guys are doing, I admire what you're doing. This is the hardest thing you're ever gonna have to deal with in terms of, running the schools, trying to teach the kids, trying to keep your teachers safe, trying to keep the kids safe. And to Mr. Montemore's point, those kids going back to their homes with their parents and their grandparents. I mean, my mother's 85. She was a school teacher. I can't even imagine her being a school teacher right now, how much I'd be worried about it, were she still a school teacher right now. Heck, I have to worry about her right now, and wear my mask around. Even now, I wear my mask around her, right? So I thank you for what you're doing. I know LISD is doing it as well, but what I'm telling you is please, as these next 2 weeks, as you move down the road here and you're starting to see how the landscape is developing and what you need, you've got to tell us. And I know that Commissioner Moran, Commissioner Moran, the Commissioner of Education, just put out a statement. I'll just read this to you. It is quite troubling. This is a news story that just popped. It says the head of the Texas Education Agency said that schools are dealing with major operational issues. Commissioner Mike Morath told members of the state's Department of Education that community spread is so rampant that it's pretty much a guarantee that someone with an active infection is walking into a school campus. And so when you have the commissioner who has political constraints on him as well, because he's appointed by the governor, says something like that in the open to his board, then it is a very precarious point that we're at right now. So thank you for what you're doing. Don't hold back in telling us what you need. Let us take let us help you make the case to the governor and to, of course, to our colleagues in the House and the Senate. Of course, Senator Saverini, she is another one that and Representative King, we've constantly been on this. We try not to get in the way. We try to come in and help you. When I was reached out to on Saturday about this issue on the campuses. I said, look, yes, I talk to the Commissioner of Health all the time, but I don't have enough information to be comfortable in telling him overrule whatever Dr. Trevino is doing. But here is his cell phone, and you guys call him. You get your lawyers, you get your superintendents. You call him right now, he'll take your call. And so I want to help. I don't want to get in the way. I want to help back you up, but I want to make sure that at the end of the day, with all the financial constraints and considerations that we have, that we don't forget what Dr. Trevino is saying. We have a real outbreak here. We don't have ICU, pediatric ICU. And even for the adults, that Dr. Trevino can also tell you, we've been dealing with this issue since last year in terms of having capability in ICU. I'm calling insurance companies, telling them to do away with pre-authorization, because we're trying to move other patients into other hospitals, and pre-authorization and coverage is holding up the movement of patients. I'm calling the insurance company saying, you got to waive that stuff now. So we're doing everything we can, but you have to tell us what you need. And again, I thank you for letting me come up and just make some comments here, but I want to help. We want to help. And also we want to say thank you, because you've got one of the hardest jobs that anybody could have, balancing education and the lives of all these children and teachers and all the support personnel that you have. So, but this stuff is for real. I'll say this. There were 50-some of us legislators that went up to Washington, and I was wearing my mask, but most weren't. And everybody had their shots. But 2 days after being in that little plane, 6 of them come up with COVID. And so we've been testing. I've been testing daily for 2 months now. I get tested every day for 2 months, but I wear my mask, and it makes a big difference. But it can take off just like that, whether or not you have the vaccination. Finally, let me say this stuff that you all already know, but it's a reminder. You have to remind people. Many people that have the COVID virus are asymptomatic. In other words, they have it and they have no idea they have it because they don't have shit, they don't have runny nose, they don't have cough, they don't have anything, but they're spreaders, right? And that's the real dangerous. That's another real dangerous part of all this, is that a lot of these kids would have been exposed. It's just natural they would have been exposed, and a lot of them will be carriers, but they won't be showing symptoms, but they're spreading it, and that's what you've got to be careful about. I would like to ask this before I leave, if somebody can answer it. I've thought about this. On a regular basis, do you have some idea during the flu season, how many students of your 40-some thousand, roughly 40,000 students, how many students, like last year, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, how many students at USD were noted as having flu-like symptoms? Do you know? It's something that you ought to look up, because that'll be an indicator of what you can sort of might happen. Just looking at your history in the past 5 or 6 years, what happens, how many kids are we having? Because I know that the protocol, typically, if a kid comes in, if a student comes in with flu-like symptoms, you either send them home or you segregate them in some way, right? So it may give you some idea what's around the bend by just looking back during regular flu seasons.
Mr. Raymond, I just wanted to comment that United, 90% of our employees are elected. That's a lot of employees. And
Well, that's a lot better than the state of Texas average.
and that's what I'm saying. United is taking care of United.
Yeah.
The city needs to take care of the city.
I understand, but United is in the city of Laredo, and so we have that to deal with.
I know, but
You know.
I think, we're looking out for our people. We're looking out for the other people that are
Well,
causing a lot of problems.
But that guy up there,
That's
that guy up there,
not-
that guy up there, Dr. Trevino, is looking out for everybody. I've seen it for long before all this started. I've seen how much he's done to help so many people in the community. But from the time this took off until now, he hasn't taken a day off, and I very much appreciate him. And there are no lines for him. It's all about people. And he doesn't care which building you're standing in, which parking lot you're parking in, where you're going to say to which HEB you're going. That doesn't matter to him. What matters is what's going on in the community in terms of the lives. People are being affected and people that are dying. The lady that was my district director for 20 years, her sister died last year, almost a year ago right now. She was in her 40s. And then her father died a week later. My other assistant, her brother died about 2 weeks after that, all three from COVID. So, you know, I don't have to tell you. We've lost 900 people in Laredo in a year, a little over a year. That's it.
I really appreciate you taking your time. I know you're a pretty busy person, just like elected representative, but I don't know.
My cell phone
For
works.
you to be here.
My cell phone works, and anybody who's tried to get me, you know, you can get me anytime of the day or night. When I don't want you to get me anymore, I'll stop running, but I'm still running.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Just to share with everybody as well, we did, the flu, the actual flu itself in last year's numbers was a big time reduction just because of the fact that we were using masks from the previous year. Also want to share with everybody that we do have in-house clinics at every one of our campuses that test for flu and test for strep, in addition to the testing for COVID that we do as well.
Yeah, I know there's a large amount of student population that are actually vaccinated. The one exception being the 12 and under is a main concern, I think, from out of all this, they don't have that vaccination available to them. But on that note, and in accordance with Mr. Raymond's comments, I just want to make the rest of the board aware that Judge Lopez has ruled in UIB's favor and in the city of Laredo's favor, and basically upheld our resolution. So our mask mandate has our going against the governor and requiring masks in all UIB facilities has been upheld by the court today after our hearing. The reason we were late. So I guess now we're looking at the appellate process and see where that's going to go.
Mr. Montoya, may I say one last thing about that?
Sure.
You know, those of us that have been involved in public ed for a long time, the reason we have a lot better and more equity in public ed funding is because we didn't went to court. It took us going to court. It took years of lawsuits. And it's not that I want to encourage you to give this guy more business over here, Bill more hours. Well, he likes me now, but you can't be afraid of that, because sometimes, because there are other political forces, you know, sort of moving things in a certain direction, sometimes you've got to go to the court, and you cannot be afraid. If you feel like you're in the right and you feel like you're doing what is right for the community, for the school, for the students, you don't have to have a hair trigger. but don't be afraid to use that. Because sometimes that's the only way you can do it. If you hadn't done that right now, if you hadn't gone to court, you know, you'd be in a worse situation.
Maybe worse, it could be worse.
So I just want you to know, I totally agree with that, and the governor should understand that since he was Attorney General, and he was always fond of suing people, so.
I just want to thank, in behalf of the board, Joe, the Judge Lopez for sticking up for a fellow technical, a fellow Laredo, and I'm real proud of him. And I'm real proud of everybody that's working to, keep the safety of our kids and our employees and everybody.
Molina, and I will concur with that. I'd like to recognize our board president for testifying today. As well as Deputy Superintendent Roy and myself testified today in court with Judge Lopez. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to Representative Raymond for his words, Dr. Trevino for his words. With that, we'll move on to item number 5, approval of awarding bid proposals and qualifications.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. President, school board members, administration, Mr. Superintendent Gonzalez, legal. For the record, my name is Carlos Garcia. I am a procurement specialist with the purchasing department of United. Today, we are presenting to you for your approval an RFP under our custodial department. It's RFP 048 2021 disinfecting services for various district facilities. There's a recommendation of 2 vendors, a primary vendor, which is this Disinfect Pro Master as the primary vendor, and a secondary is Mendoza Maintenance Group, Inc. If there's any questions?
Motion to approve.
So move, second.
All right, I got a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against, any abstentions?
I'll be abstaining.
1 abstention, 2 abstentions. Motion carries. With that, we'll adjourn for the